What up, folks? Welcome back to the CHGO Sky Podcast, a function of CHGO Sports and the ALLCITY Sports Network, broadcasting live from Chicagoland and wherever podcasts are sold. I'm Chris Pennant. He's Stephen Garner. The man behind the curtain, pay no attention to him, is Lawrence Benedetto. And Stephen, I hope you're doing well. I want to get to, just your general feelings about life in the week, of course, and the holiday, but it's been a rough month. And I want to get into it with a nod to the Key and Peele sketch with the Black Republicans. I am royally upset. Because this is not what any of us signed up for. The Chicago Sky going down to defeat two more times over the weekend, a close loss against the Minnesota Lynx on Sunday, and a bad loss to the Indiana Fever on Friday brings their record since the Olympic break to 1-7, and they are now tied for the 8th spot in the WNBA at 11-21 with the Atlanta Dream. Stephen, before we come back to the Labor Day weekend holiday thoughts, I got to ask, man, if there's anything that you could pick out as a key for what's gone wrong with the Sky since they came back from Paris, what has it been?
That's a great question. I feel like that's a multi-part question for sure that you would have to kind of break down each entity that comes from it. That being said, though, a lot of these games have come within a few possessions in terms of the margin for error, as well as what the game is ultimately decided by in terms of the scoreboard and what that represents. I feel like the Chicago Sky team is really lacking being able to play to a particular identity in crunch time play. And I feel like the mediocre results, and really even past mediocre, just the deficit in terms of results, especially with games that are within reach, speaks to them just not having that identity piece. They don't feel like they have a specific dynamic of their game collectively that they can lean into and rely on to get them those wins. Whereas when you go against a team like Vegas, this season, especially more than in seasons past, they know they're leaning on their offense. And naturally, that means that A'ja Wilson is going to have the ball in her hands most frequently. Look at the Minnesota Lynx. They know where they want to get the ball to, but in addition to know where they want to get the ball to, they have a tried and true process to where even if it is Fee that's not getting the ball, somebody like Courtney Williams, if you're screening or if you're screen navigation and your pick and roll defense isn't up to par, can just pick you apart from the mid-range. And you can say that with a handful of other teams if we cycle through these games in the clutch that they've lost recently. So the biggest piece for me continues to be identity. We know they get on the glass, but in tandem with that, glass eating has to come getting stops defensively. That's mainly more than anything else the thing that stands out most to me. And that's not what I would have thought they would be lacking in these clutch time moments had you told me that this would happen 2 months ago.
Yeah, when we started the season, Teresa Weatherspoon really made a point to say about individuals and about the team that they wanted to hang their hat on defense. And part of that defensive identity was not just hitting the glass, which they have been doing all season long. That at least has not gone by the wayside. Angel has been devouring the defensive boards more so recently, and Camila Cardoso is doing well at getting defensive rebounds as well. So they've been at least ensuring that there's one shot most of the time. But defensively, in terms of getting stops, disrupting a team's offense at the point of attack, not allowing them to get below the arc or the free throw line, a lot of those things have disappeared. And I don't know if it's a question of exhaustion at this point in the season. We know Camila and Angel pretty much went straight from college into the season. We know a good amount of the other players played overseas and then came back for training camp. But if it's exhaustion, if it's just a loss of defensive intensity, what? I've watched these games in person and on TV, and I don't know what's lacking or what's happened. What's happened with that defensive piece?
Well, this is what I was speaking to early on in the season, where people were talking about they wouldn't be a playoff team. They win 9 games, insert number here that's a lot lower than the field in terms of the number of games that they would win. Also, for the people that were saying it would be like the 8 seed or the 7 seed or even potentially the 6 seed in a pie as the sky scenario. All of that's kind of fun in terms of discourse when you're going into a season, but a team that has so much newness, and I'm talking about newness from general manager to head coach to the entire coaching staff to a majority of the players on the roster, that's just entirely too much to kind of figure out in what was the shortest training camp in the history of the W, paired with it also being an Olympic season. That's just entirely too much adversity scheduling wise to kind of make these things work as quickly as you think they would. That in mind, in addition to them having their two pillar pieces in Camila Cardoso and Angel Reese, both being rookies. This is why I was saying in the preseason that this team has to be stripped of expectations to that degree. And you have to just assess how they're moving forward within their process as a team. Because if you put expectations on them, naturally they're going to kind of underwhelm unless you're just spot on in terms of luck of the draw, in terms of numbers of wins or where you might project they might finish the season. I did say that I felt this team would be a playoff team, but I was not putting any type of expectations on them because of this. There's going to be hiccups and snags within their process. There's going to be times where they feel like they figured it all out. There's also going to be times where it doesn't look like they really are all on the same page collectively. And we've seen high variance between those two spectrums, post-Olympic / post-All-Star break. And I just keep harkening back to what I mentioned in the preseason. Just assess them for what they're doing in the now. They've been mediocre in terms of the results, and that's pretty much to be expected because of what we've been seeing the last few minutes, or the last few weeks, rather.
All right, sounds like Chris is having trouble with his audio, so we're going to let him hop off here and hop back in. In the meantime, let's see, where can we go here? Let's just get this comment in about.
You talk about Angel Reese and these rebounding numbers and the records that she continues to set and all of that fun stuff. I guess I'll get your perspective on it first, Lawrence.
I mean, I think, like you said, this team, as David in the comments said, they're picked to finish last, right?
Mm-hmm,
exactly. And as he said, they trade away their second leading scorer. Obviously, that's Ka. I mean, the lineup has been kind of crazy. Marina. And if you look at these last few games, they've missed Kennedy Carter as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that ain't great. So she's your leading scorer. And, it's tough to win these games. But I just feel like they keep making these mistakes down the stretch of games. I know we're going to talk about that with Chris when he gets back in here. But, it's just tough to win games when you have such a small margin for error.
Yep. And I think that some of the issues that they're seeing in terms of consistency also comes from the style of play, where certain teams, and that's like a majority of the league, are getting up a certain number of 3-point attempts. And when you're not even getting up the same number of attempts on a consistent basis, yet alone the number of makes that other teams are, if a majority of your points are coming from two and there's no balancing act from deep, right, teams are gonna, for one, guard you completely differently than they guard other teams. That's gonna make it harder for you to get your twos. And if that efficiency slips from elite level to even average, you're seeing 15 or 20 point differences just off of what your statistics say on average. That's a steep mountain to climb. And if Angel's not grabbing 15 offensive rebounds and they're scoring on 8 to 10 of those possessions that come from that, there's no wiggle room. The defense can still be above average to borderline elite at times, but just off of numbers alone and the way that the WNBA game flows now, if you're not checking off your boxes in terms of your process numerically to match what other teams are doing, you're just always going to be fighting an uphill battle and really kind of punching against a brick wall in a sense.
Yeah. Chris, just want to make sure you're back good, and then I'll let you jump back in.
Yeah, it looks like we're back, and it looks like y'all were saying all the things that I was thinking about too, where if, I think that's the most telling one, Stephen, as you said, if Angel's not grabbing 15 offensive boards, then, what are you doing? And what can you do? And it's more pronounced with Kennedy Carter being out of the lineup. I mean, we knew it was going to be an uphill battle against teams like Indiana without Kennedy, against Las Vegas without Kennedy. But what hurts is the fact that the Sky were in those games. They were in the game against even Indiana. It was a 4-point game after the half resumed, after Angel shot the technical free throw. And then Indiana ended up going up by 27 at one point in the fourth quarter. It was just like a slow raw ball rolling down the hill that just kept accumulating, just snowballing till the end of the game. Against Las Vegas, they clawed back from a big deficit with Kennedy in the lineup and then lost on a last-second play. Minnesota, they came back from a deficit and then turned the ball over twice in the last 43 when the Lynx were only up by 4, and you have a chance to get 2 or 3 possessions in that game. You can see from the graphic here, we've got 6 of the 7 losses in the blowout, and I didn't include the first game against Phoenix because the Sky didn't lead in that game at all. At least in the second game, they led for a total of 33 seconds. 2 blown leads against Connecticut and Washington with less than 5 minutes left in the game. They came back from that deficit against the Aces, which made that last-second layup sting even more. And then the game against Indiana, honestly, I know the Minnesota game is the most recent one, but the crux of that was the 2 flagrant fouls in the fourth quarter and the technical foul on Michaela Onyenwere, where it just seemed like the Sky lost their cool. I had to turn that game off at a certain point because, I mean, you don't want to lose any games when you're trying to make the playoffs, but you don't want to lose in what's the marquee game when the league has built up this rivalry, when the fans have committed to this rivalry being what it is, and when they've had 3 very good games before that. This is the first time, even though Indiana, I think, won by 9 earlier in the season, this is the first time where it felt like one of the teams was out of it before the game really got to the clutch moment.
Yeah, that was one of the ones where it wasn't really close, and they never really, outside of the start to that game, they really felt like they were playing uphill the last 3 quarters of that game. That's just hard to do, especially with the team like Indiana that's playing the way that they're playing for one. That has the pieces of, especially at the guard position between Caitlin Clark as well as Kelsey Mitchell. They can score at prolific rates and in abundance in the ways that those two can, both independent of each other and in tandem with one another. It's just entirely too much. And I mean, excluding the loss to the Indiana Fever from Friday, just kind of looking at the Sky and the clutch games post All-Star break, they have 7 games I believe they played since coming back from break. 4 of those games came in the clutch. They went 1-3. One of the biggest things that stands out: fouls conceded to opponents. So how many times the Chicago Sky fouled on average in clutch moments? 3.8 fouls. That is an astronomically high number. That speaks to a lack of discipline in moments. That speaks to inability to defend without fouling. And it just generally speaks to them not being steady on that end of the floor. Granted, sometimes some of that comes from some of the just kind of inexplicable turnovers that we've seen from this team in the clutch that puts you at a disadvantage even trying to get back on defense, yet alone if you have your defensive shell set and then you're making rotations and you're just not able to defend without fouling from there. A couple of other things that really stand out to me. I think they're 3rd in opposing free throw attempts in the clutch. Yeah, they're 3rd since the break. I mean, they're giving up 5 trips to the free throw line in the clutch in every scenario that's come up post break. It's just too much to try to overcome, especially again when you see the issues that you do on the offensive side of the floor. If I'm speaking as a member of the Chicago Sky, their process just generally hasn't been where it needs to be, and it's leaving a lot more to be desired. And we're seeing kind of the results match that. And I think maybe one of the biggest things, for one, like Lawrence mentioned, having your best player on the court in those moments gives you a big chance. I mean, there's no bigger example than, though they lost the game against the Las Vegas Aces, put the ball in Kennedy's hands, let her put her cape on, you see what she does. She's been one of the 10 best basketball players in the W for multiple stretches this season, and she's no less than top 15 on the season as a whole. The other big thing, I just keep speaking to the identity piece, man. They have to figure out how they want to play in those moments, and they need to figure out how to how to create a process that's repeatable and easy to execute upon. I just feel like their issues kind of compound when things matter most, and you would obviously rather it be them figuring out what they want to do, get into it, and get into it with pace.
I want you to come back to that point, Stephen, because I like what you said about the free throws in the clutch, because that came into play in one of these losses in the streak. But for the moment, let's talk about our sponsor, Coors Light. In these difficult times, when the Sky are in the thick of the playoff chase and they are, it seems like, a couple of games away from falling out of it entirely, those are the times where you want to relax, take a breath, get with your people, and choose chill. And the best way to choose chill is with Coors Light. An ice cold Coors Light, always cold filtered, cold packaged, never frozen. As cold as the Colorado Rockies. When you see the mountains are blue, you know it's time for you to pick up that can, pop the top, and choose chill. You can get it at Wintrust Arena. You can get it at your favorite night spot to watch the game, and you can get it at home. And so always, 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 when you're tuning into the Sky game, feel free to open the refrigerator door and choose chill. Mountain cold refreshment, and the best way to embrace a chill mindset. And you can get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/CHGO Dunk. That is CoorsLight.com/CHGO Dunk. So make sure to choose chill and celebrate responsibly when you do. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. And as always, it's time for my favorite read of the entire show, Shady Rays. I know it's September, school's back in session, but that doesn't mean that summer is over quite yet. And when you see the sunlight out like it is today, you want to choose Shady Rays. The sunglasses company rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Durable frames and crystal clear optics. They probably have a style in your favorite team's colors, so you can get those Chicago Sky blue and gold. And I always like to wear Shady Rays when I'm out at the court playing softball or just taking a nice bike ride to the lakefront and back. If your shades ever go missing, take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have great protection, and every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And if you don't like the sunglasses you get, you can exchange them for a new pair or return them worry-free within 30 days. So exclusively for our listeners today, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to ShadyRays.com right now and use the code CHGO for 35% off. That's 35% off polarized sunglasses. So try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Shady Rays, exclusive sponsor of CHGO Sports. Steve, when you're talking about those free throws, I want to go back to that graphic if we can, Lawrence, with the blown leads, the blowouts, and the blown chances. The game against Connecticut, where the Sky led 74-68 with 3:52 left. We've seen that they've had some times where they've had trouble scoring in the clutch without Kennedy Carter. Kennedy was here for that game, but what's most pronounced is that the Sky were up 80-77 with 1:52 on the clock. Connecticut did not make another field goal. They won the game at the free throw line. And Tyasha Harris made 2 free throws to get it to a 1-point game. With 35 seconds left, DeWanna Bonner split a pair to tie the game. The Sky got the defensive rebound off the missed free throw, took a timeout. They weren't able to get what they wanted out of that timeout, I remember it. It ended up being Lindsey Allen shooting a jumper from 14 that she missed. And then Connecticut got the rebound. And Alyssa Thomas got fouled with 4 seconds left and hit 2 free throws. That's like the ideal situation in terms of Alyssa Thomas shooting the free throws. But in a tie game with 4 seconds left, you don't want to commit a foul. And you got to get some sort of points in those last just under 2 minutes. And the Sky were held scoreless. It was two missed jumpers and an offensive foul turnover in that last 1:52. They weren't able to get anything that they wanted. And that's what gets so, there's no one thing that they have that you can key on, like, oh, they were missing this and so they lost the game. It's been a variety of reasons and ways that they've lost games. But those free throws, giving up fouls, giving up free throws, not getting the shot they wanted, not being able to get the ball inside either early or late, or just not having the pieces that can hit a jumper when you need it. That's what's made this last stretch so frustrating.
Yeah, that's the big thing. on offense. And if we're looking at that game against Connecticut specifically, I spent a lot of time speaking to Kennedy Carter being the team's closer, stepping into that role, that being something as an identity piece, identifying marker was something that they needed somebody to step into. I felt like there was no better player on the roster for the ways that she can score off of movement, scoring without help from anybody else, just everybody getting out the way. Pick and roll, transition. She can score from the mid post. Kennedy is, if you're excluding the 3-point line, she is limitless on offense. And the 3-point shot is going to come. You can bookmark this. You can revisit it next season. Kennedy Carter will be shooting and making 3-pointers at an efficient rate within the next 2 seasons. That being said, though, when you have Kennedy on the floor against the Connecticut Sun, a team that knows you well, a team that defends you about as well as any other team in the W, they're just packing the paint. You have to figure out ways to create space, but you also have to be able to get the ball into your best player's hands and allow for them to make plays, whether Kennedy's scoring for herself or if she's using the attention that she garners to play make for others and put others in successful scenarios. You have to get her the ball. We didn't see her with the ball nearly enough in that final 3 minutes and some change where Connecticut was able to come back and ultimately win that game, where the odds were against them in terms of clutch play. I think that in and of itself is a microcosm of everything. The team has a clear-cut closer. Kenny didn't have the ball in that scenario. I don't think she touched it at all the last 2 minutes. I'll have to look back again, but I don't think she touched the ball the last 2 minutes. And there were no plays drawn up for her either. I think that's just a mistake. That's only a mistake that you make when there's no clear-cut course for success that you're operating off of. If you're kind of doing it on a per game basis, it's going to lead to mixed bags of results. And I think that's a lot of what we've been seeing of late. And then the other big thing with the Chicago Sky, again, like you said, defense has to be it. But if you can't contain the basketball on the perimeter, everything in succession from there is going to put you behind the 8-ball. And that's going to be where you're starting to compile these fouls where you do a good job playing defense for 17 seconds of the shot clock. You get to the last handful of seconds and you bail somebody out, or you concede an offensive rebound and they get to eat away more time of possession and get up another attempt on goal than you potentially might in that particular segment of the game. And this is just the nature of those compounding issues. And the last big thing is the turnovers. You can't turn the ball over at the rates that they have and expect to duck the clutch play just by taking care of the ball, or be able to out-execute an opponent if you're giving them the ball so freely. And a lot of the turnovers stem from them trying to get the ball to the post. It's good in process in terms of the intention, but if you're not executing it, you just have to find another route to success. Because you can say throwing to the wide receiver that's wide open all the time is great, but if your quarterback doesn't have an arm to get it 40 yards downfield, what good does that do you? Just for another cross-sport reference. You got to be better. You got to do what works for your team well in those moments. Otherwise, you're going to be working in favor of your opponents.
Want to just say thank you to everybody who's coming in the chat. My man Marcel checked in earlier. Obviously, Region Rev out in Gary, David Bresson, Zach Knopf is in here with us, and we've got a lot of talk in the chat that Mystics game was a backbreaker that needed to be a W from 90CN3. That's an interesting username. That's true. The Mystics game, that was a tough loss because, I mean, the Sky now, they're 1-2 against Washington, who were for a good portion of the season was the worst team in the league by record, and is a team that the Sky have beaten and know that they can beat. So losing that game, especially losing that game close, is tough. People are talking about Dallas and the pick, which, I mean, this is Playoffs or Lottery Bound is the title of the show, so we should delve into that.
Mm-hmm.
The Sky are in a very difficult spot. You want to get to ideally at the beginning of the season, you want to get to the playoffs. One, because it was not the pick that a lot of the pundits made. Two, because you have rookies coming in who can make a quick impact and a coach who had everybody ready to run through a wall when she came in. and the way that they started the season, 10-14 at the All-Star break or the Olympic break, put them in a very good spot. At the same time, Dallas was 6-19 when the Sky were 10-14, which comes out to 4.5 games better than the Wings. Now that's been trimmed to 2. And because of the pick swap in the Marina Mabry deal, if the Sky finish in worse position than Dallas, the Wings have the right to swap those picks. So the tough spot is this. The Sky have a game against Dallas in Dallas on September 8th. You want to win that game.
No. That's at Wintrust.
That's at Wintrust? I'm sorry, that's a home game.
Yep.
I was looking I realized I was looking at the Dallas schedule on Basketball Reference. So that's why I said real Thank you for correcting me.
You got it.
It's not really you want to win that game. You really have to win that game because whether you end up in the lottery or not, if you're in a better position than Dallas, then they can swap picks. The Sky can't get the number 1 pick anyway, so they're really relegated to 2 and 4. And if somehow they finish 3rd and Dallas finishes 4th in terms of the lottery, then Dallas can move up 1 slot and take that number 3 pick. And this is a draft where that positioning really does matter. If you're 1 spot better or worse, then you might lose out on a quality guard, which is something that I guarantee you that they're going to be looking for a point guard in this upcoming draft. I guarantee you, I will stand on that from now until the draft day. And if I'm wrong, somebody think of something because I will go through with whatever that punishment for losing that bet is. But I can almost guarantee you that they're looking for a point guard in this draft, as well as I think another perimeter shooter. But you have to play these games like they count. You have to get these wins. You just have to get these wins. Whether you make the playoffs or not, you have to make an effort to stay in that spot. Because if Dallas can take that pick, never mind what's happened in the past with Dallas and young players and free agents and the decision that they've got with Satsu Sabali over the offseason, they can change the course of their franchise like we've seen with Indiana and to some degree Chicago in this offseason.
Yep. And to your point, looking at the schedule ahead, you mentioned the head-to-head matchup directly with the Dallas Wings next Sunday, September 8th, that's taking place at Wintrust. The Sky also have a game with the Atlanta Dream coming up on the 17th, their penultimate game of the regular season, taking place on the 17th of September. That game is going to be in Atlanta. I'm mentioning those 2 games in particular because the way the standings are set up right now, the Atlanta Dream they have the same record as the Chicago Sky right now. The Sky are 2-1 against the Atlanta Dream. So at this present moment, they hold the tiebreaker advantage. The Dallas Wings, you already mentioned that game on the 8th that's taking place next Sunday at Wintrust, are 9-23. They're 2 games behind the Chicago Sky right now. But the way that the Sky are descending and the way that the Dallas Wings are ascending, a lot of the things with the Dallas Wings pertaining particularly just to health alone, they've gotten a crop of the players that have been missing for 2.5 to 3 months, if not the entire regular season. They're getting those players back. And for people that don't remember, the Dallas Wings finished in the semifinals last season. They lost to the eventual champions in the Las Vegas Aces, but it wasn't in a blowout fashion. Those games in the playoffs with the Aces were close. And when we're speaking to an identity that the Dallas Wings have, yes, Arike Ogunbowale is the engine that makes their car go, or that makes their Lambo truck go. The big thing in it, though, outside of Arike, they have identifying markers all around their roster. Satu Sabali, arguably the second best Robin to anybody's Batman or Superwoman to anything like that in the W side of things. Satu sometimes is the best player on the Dallas Wings. And it's not because she puts the ball in the basket better than Arike, because obviously she doesn't. Only few people in the world that play basketball do that. Satu does a lot of the connective things that you need for a team's process to work. Playing inside, playing outside, passing the ball, screening, playmaking and pick and roll, post-ups, defense, guarding 1 through 5, being able to make entry passes to their post players so that their inside-out advantage hits the way that it needs to for their offensive process to work the way that they need it to. Satu does a ton of little things that the Sky just don't have a player that can do to the levels that they needed to for their offensive process to work the way that they needed to. a lot of those turnovers that the Chicago Sky see when they're trying to get the ball to Angel and Camila are not the same type of issues that the Dallas Wings see when Satu's in the lineup, because she's able to make those passes to Tierra McCowan and Kalani Brown when they're in the post when they need it there, and so that they can catch it and go up without having to do too much work outside of posting up and sealing. I think there's little things within the Sky process that are really lacking when kind of comparing in that respect. And I feel like for those reasons, the Dallas Wings understand who they are. They play to their identity extremely well when they're healthy. And we see a stark difference in the team we saw early this season versus now, largely because of that. And I feel like if the Sky can't figure out how to get those 2 wins in particular against the Dallas Wings and the Atlanta Dream, that's going to be something that really works against them. And until I see them lose to both of those teams, I can't say that they're still going to miss the playoffs. I do still think that because they're in the driver's seat in terms of their destination future-wise this season, that gives them a leg up on the teams that are right behind them in terms of trying to catch up from behind. So I'm not going to say that they're missing the playoffs. I said in the beginning of the season that they would make the playoffs. I said it's not going to look the way that most people think it will. It's probably not going to even look the way that I thought it would. And newsflash, it doesn't look like I thought it would. Marina Mabrey's not even on the team anymore. That being said, they still have a bar. They still are in the driver's seat for what their future is. And I do think that obviously they desire to make the playoffs, but I think they will. It might end up being because of the tiebreakers, though. And I just want to make sure I noted that for everybody that's viewing.
We'll come back to that too, because we got a lot more, some news that came out last week during games that we haven't touched on yet, and our thoughts on if the Sky, how they will make the playoffs or will get to the lottery. But first things first, let's talk about some brighter things, some sunny sides of life, if you will, and that you can find them only at Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. They're here to elevate your summer, and as we go into the fall, they have great brands, quality lines like Cresco and Florical. Wherever you are in Illinois, Sunnyside has a location for you, whether you're up north in Wrigleyville, whether you're up further north in South Beloit, or whether you're far down south in Champaign, taking your kids down for their first day of school, taking your kids. Don't bring the kids. This is just for you. You can go to Sunnyside. And if you got any more time on the links, if you missed out on the Kickoff Classic, we hope you didn't. But if you didn't post the score you wanted, you should have gotten that Good News Tea Time disposable vape, classic lemonade flavor that's perfect for the golf course. So if you check out Sunnyside online, check out sunnyside.shop for Bright Buys every single day, including 50% off your first 3 purchases using the code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Again, that's 50% off your first 3 online purchases if you use that promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions do apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. Bright Buys every day, only for ages 21 and over or Illinois medical card holders. And I know that we've got a lot of things coming up with the other CHGO sports podcasts on the show. Hope you were able to make it out to the Fire game for the takeover on the 31st. Unfortunately, there was no Messi, but it was a solid game against Inter Miami. The Cubs takeover is a few days away, September 6th against the Yankees. It's nearly sold out. Go to allchgo.com/events to get your tickets. And the Bears. Ooh, boy, the Bears are coming up on a season that you will not want to miss. And if you got your passport ready, check out the crew going to London in October. There's a few full packages remaining, direct flights to London. Customize your own package of CHGO events. And you can get your individual event tickets now at truefantravel.com. So head there to secure your spot on the best Bears trip of the year. If you can't make it, if you don't have your passport, if you don't like fish and chips, if you don't like that HP brown sauce, then check out the crew as they go to Phoenix, Arizona in November to take on the Cardinals. You can holler at our friend Erica Lee Day at PHNX Sports. Three-night stay at a 4-star hotel, Q&A with Bears alumni, all-inclusive tailgate party. There's a whole lot of stuff for you to do with the CHGO Sports crew this fall. So check out truefantravel.com for that trip right now. And as always, if you're a CHGO diehard, you get 20% off those events, merchandise for all teams, a free shirt when you become a member, and premium written content for members at allchgo.com and more. So check us out online, on the shows, and become a diehard today. That's at allchgo.com. That's at allchgo.com. Stephen, you brought up a good point about making the playoffs, because my thoughts, I think, are kind of opposite of yours right now. Based on the current stretch, I don't know if they're going to be able to make that postseason tournament. But there's some news that we have to bring up that I know some people have already talked about in the comments. Dana Evans last week was asked about potential trade talks, trade discussions, or trade requests before a game. And at that time, her answer was that she did not request a trade. She clarified the next day on Twitter, on social media, that she had requested a trade before the All-Star break, or initiated trade talks at least, talked to the front office. And when the trade didn't materialize, she said that she was all in with the team for the remainder of the season. But it appears that the Dana Evans era in Chicago after this season will likely come to a close. She's a restricted free agent, which means that the Sky have the right of first refusal for any teams that send in an offer sheet for her. But I would not be surprised if Dana is playing elsewhere in 2025. It's not what we wanted to see when Dana was given the keys to that Lambo truck, as you called it earlier this season. When she finally got that starting role, it was Dana season, like our man French Bulls TV said in his username. It was Dana season, but the team and Teresa Weatherspoon didn't really see what they wanted, and that led to Lindsey Allen and Kennedy Carter being moved into the starting lineup. What are your thoughts on just Dana's season so far, and then the trade request and anything else related to
that? Chris, I don't know if you remember, but we had a conversation just speaking to the whole Dana Evans situation and whether she would make it past the trade deadline. That's a tough situation, especially when she's been up and down in the rotation since the beginning of the season. I feel like there was some unfair expectations placed upon Dana to be this player that she hasn't shown to be on the WNBA level quite yet. And I feel like a lot of the things that we've seen have kind of stemmed from those conversations and those general expectations. Dana is a budding basketball player that is clearly extremely good at multiple things on the basketball court. The biggest thing, in my opinion, being her ability to defend the heck out of the basketball. No one guards the way that Dana Evans can. No one's picking up players 94 feet, making them turn 2-3 times before crossing the half-court line, and just generally causing fits the way that she does defensively from the point of attack against guards, specifically point guards. There's a lot of value in that, but I think some of the issues that come with Dana, especially this season, has been the inefficiencies that she's seen on the offensive side of the floor. So she's never been a player that's lacked ability to turn the corner, to get around whoever her primary defender was. The questions start to come when you're looking at her finishing at the basket, particularly below the free throw line. How efficient is her floater? Is she getting to the free throw line? When she does have opportunities at the rim, is she finishing on consistency? The other big thing is the three-point shooting. As a smaller guard, the margin of error that you have is so much significantly smaller than any other player on the floor, quite literally off of stature, but also figuratively off of the numbers in your efficiency. And then the last big thing that I'll speak to is playing point guard. There's no statistic that can equate to letting you know whether someone's playing point guard the way that their team needs them to, or whether they're not. You can look at all these arbitrary box score numbers. You can say this player putting up 15, 5, and 5 on 45% from the field, whatever. That might not necessarily be how that particular team needs that particular player to facilitate and set the table for everybody else that's on the floor. That being said, one of the best ways to tell whether a point guard is playing the way that the team needs them to in terms of the team being optimized is how the pieces respond to that player on the floor. In inter-player relationships, but also past just that, looking at how those players are statistically when that lead guard is on the floor. And I mean, it's not hard to tell just if you're watching the games, but statistically, the Chicago Sky have been better with Lindsey Allen on the floor at the point guard position than Dana Evans this season. And that's a tough draw, because Dana obviously started the season and Lindsay came in as the reserve guard. But I do think that there's dynamics in play there that make it what it is. I think that Dana Evans, and I know that Dana Evans, past thinking, I know that Dana Evans is a score first guard, and Lindsay Allen is a lot more of a traditional guard. I think that the traditional guard, just because of the players that they have on the floor in that starting lineup, is kind of what better suits the starting lineup that the Chicago Sky are working towards. If you're looking at what they have now with Kennedy being a score first player, Angela and Camila being obviously paint oriented more than anything else, but also needing players that can facilitate to them within that advantage, because they can't go down there and create for themselves with a live dribble like an Asia Wilson can. I think there's things in that in terms of functionality that suggest that they need a more traditional point guard. So I think those things kind of worked against Dana from the onset. And then the other big thing is just finding consistency. It's not that Dana can't do any of the things that I just mentioned. It's just the consistency at which those things show up on the box score. She's had moments this season. She's had a few moments this season, quite actually, when she was starting, but also in her sixth player role when she was the first reserve off the bench. It's just a matter of her finding that consistency. I think these are some of the ebbs and flows that come with the younger player, especially when you're smaller than everybody else on the floor. She's going to figure it out. It just hasn't happened this season. And because of the expectations placed upon her, the kind of inefficiencies and the lacking has just been a little bit louder than it typically would have been.
Yeah, I think it would be different if the Sky had a better record or if there wasn't a spotlight on the rebuild. But as a more veteran presence, and I remember I asked her about this on media day, what it was going to be like having played for multiple different head coaches and having different roles pretty much each season at the outset of this one. In this type of offense, especially when you're talking about working inside out, Dana's primary positives do kind of run counter to how you want to set up a team like that, where you want your point guard to get the ball in first and then either drop off to the wing or possibly to the corner for an outside shot. And Dana really succeeds best when she can get below the free throw line and initiate as a scorer and a driver and then move the ball back out rather than be, a three-point option after the fact. And it is tough because I wanted to see if she could take the play that she had with Besiktas over the wintertime and either mold or adopt that, or even just be, the second scorer, if not the 1B option early on in the season. And it, outside of a couple games, like you said, it never really materialized. But she could never really get on a consistent run and rhythm of being able to get her shots and then distribute the ball as well to the players around. And I've seen people in the comments talk about Dana's height, and I know there's something to that, but you got to look at the guards around the league. Like Courtney Vandersloot is also 5'8", 5'7", and she's carved out the Hall of Fame or potentially Hall of Fame career that we've seen her play. And I think it's really just because Dana is more like a combo guard where she wants to get the shot to fall first, and then everything comes from that rather than getting the teammates set up, and everything flows from that. I saw Region Rep say, it's like, not listening to this one, and I feel you. I honestly feel you. Because I wanted Dana to succeed here. She has so much fan support. She's local. She is a person that, she got the Jordan Brand deal and partnership, and that shows you what kind of reach that she can have as a player and as a person. But I think, as one of our listeners said a few moments ago, that she might succeed with a team that's in a different spot, like Connecticut or Phoenix or even Dallas, where she actually started out. I was thinking that Dana would probably be an upgrade over Savuzin, their current lead guard. And I think in Latricia Trammell's system, alongside Arike and with Satu, if they have Satu after this season, it depends. But when you have Arike, you have Tierra McCowan, and Maddie Siegrist, I think Dana would work well in that offense because while they have players who can post up and who can score from within 5 feet, they could still use another outside shooter. And even the times when Dana can be streaky, she can still get you buckets. Like, she just can't get you buckets. So whether it's as the guard, where they play like a two scoring guard system with Dana alongside REK at the start, when they have her come off the bench in that microwave substitute role, I think she could succeed in Dallas. And if things fall right for Dallas, that would be a winning combination. They really just had trouble this season because of Satu's injury and multiple injuries on that team that put them in the spot they're in now.
Yeah, to kind of wrap the Dana conversation up, I will say you can talk about players like Lindsey Allen. You could talk about players like Courtney Vandersloot at the guard position in particular. Those players, yes, by height, they're the same in terms of archetype, but in terms of their style and approach to the game and what their strengths are, Lindsey Allen and Courtney Vandersloot's strengths are not Dana Evans' strengths. I think that as far as smaller guards that play the point guard role in the W, there's no better person to look at than Skylar Diggins-Smith. And Skylar Diggins-Smith is a player that I spoke to last season when I had a conversation with Dana in terms of her film work and who she kind of watches to that she sees herself in terms of watching how they operate on the floor and how she can add what they do in their game to her game. She says Skylar Diggins-Smith has had the biggest impact on her style of play. She's, first of all, one of the biggest things she said that Skylar showed her that she can play and play at an elite level in the way that she goes about approaching the game. Now, obviously, there's certain efficiencies in that you have to check off that are just non-negotiables as a smaller guard, which I just got done speaking to. I do think that, like we're seeing with Skylar obviously coming back from pregnancy this season, had a slow integration back into basketball. And some of the inefficiencies that Dana has seen this season, Skylar also saw earlier this season. But the difference is that post-Olympic break, the space that Skylar's been operating in, finishing at the basket, knocking down three-pointers, the playmaking seeing an uptick both in efficiency and in volume. That's the recourse that Dana just hasn't seen this season. As a smaller guard, you have to, if you want to have a sustained career in the W, you just have to check off those boxes. I think she will at some point. It obviously hasn't happened yet this season. There's still time for her to course correct and flip that script heading into restricted free agency. But I do think that she is a player, independent of all of the nonsense and discourse that's been going on over the last 3 weeks or so around Dana. I'm not participating in any of that. Dana knows that from our conversations in person that I'm not somebody that would. But I will say that I do think that context-wise, another scenario would better benefit her. And I think that a scenario that has better spacing as a template in terms of giving her more avenues to navigate through with her live dribble. I spoke about nobody being able to stay in front of her. If you have her in space to where her paint touches and her ability to go either direction, she can be more optional with it. I think that puts her in a better position to be herself without having defenders collapsed in the paint already waiting for her. And I think then we will see her skill development hit that same type of point to where it was at multiple points last season, where she's getting to the paint, she's playmaking to the opposite corner, she's making passes in pick and roll, she's getting into her finishing with the soft touch floater, getting to the free throw line, knocking down her threes. And then the impact that her defense is feeling, in addition to all of that, just hits different because she can sustain on the floor more. I do think that she's a player that would benefit from a different scenario. And it's not for all of the reasons in discourse that are nonsensical, in my personal opinion, that we've all been seeing on Twitter. So extrapolate all of that, assess her game for what it is, revert back to what we saw her being successful doing last season. You'll see the outlet for her, and you'll just see that a different context might be what she needs for her to get back on her skill development path.
Yeah, sometimes you just need to change the scenery. And we got the rest of the season to go, as you said, but I want to see Dana succeed first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I like there's very few players that I can come out and say that I don't want to see them make it. And Dana Evans, I want to see Dana succeed. I know most or all of the people we have following the podcast want to see Dana succeed because they remember the memories that they've watched over the last few seasons. So whatever happens, I want to see Dana Evans go somewhere and get time on. Even if she ends up having to go overseas and then possibly come back, like we've seen with a lot of players, hey, she's put in the work. She deserves to get the shine. Last segment, we come up on the show. Once again, thank you all for listening. We've had a lot of interesting comments and people talking about the draft. I know we've talked about the remainder of the schedule to some degree, the important games coming up against Dallas, against Washington. They've got Connecticut again near the end of the last game of the season in Connecticut, and a lot of those are going to be must-wins. But looking at the potentials in the draft next year, I pulled up a way too early mock draft from Reddit, and take Reddit with a grain of salt. But being in the WNBA subreddit there, people are pretty well informed, and they're not just talking out of their ass, so to speak. And something that we haven't discussed is the Golden State Valkyries and what the expansion draft might mean. There hasn't been a lot of information put out, but one of the frequently asked questions on the Golden State website right now is that we'll find out which lucky WNBA players will be the first to play for the Golden State team after the December 2024 expansion draft. Then free agency will occur during the winter, and then the WNBA draft will be in the spring and round out the rosters before training camp. So every team is going to have to protect a certain number of players on their roster prior to that expansion draft, and then Golden State will have their choice of which players to pick from each team. So before we even get to the lottery and the regular draft in the spring, you have to think about which players on the roster that the Sky want to protect. Like likely three of those we already know. But you have to think about which players that they would want to not protect and which players Golden State would want to pick up before we even get into the lottery. That being said, there's a lot of talk in the lottery in the comments about Olivia Miles from Notre Dame, Anissa Morrow, who's at LSU right now, who obviously has the hometown connection coming out of Simeon and playing 2 years at DePaul, Tahina Pau from South Carolina, and, of course, AZ Fudd from Connecticut, and Sanaya Rivers, who I believe was at Virginia Tech North Carolina State. I remember watching Sanaya in the spring in those March Madness games. I got my opinion, and I think we'll round out the show with that. But, Stephen, if you look to the lottery, I know you've got a lot on your plate already. But if you look to the lottery, are there any players that stand out that would be a good fit for the Sky next year?
Yeah, two names that come to mind. One, Olivia Miles. Olivia would be yet another Notre Dame product that potentially comes to the Chicago Sky. It's like there's a connection there at that point if that was to happen for the Sky. I think that Olivia Miles will be a very good piece for the Chicago Sky to add. Gives them another player that can figure out how to get downhill on their own without needing a screen. Also a player that gets after on the defensive end and has generally a motor that's conducive to a winning environment. Another name that I would certainly like to see with this guy, Anissa Morrow. It's the connecting ability. It's the ability to play between the 3 and the 4. There's going to be some need for growth with her in terms of the versatility that she's going to have to bring on offense. But I do think that Anissa is a type of player that would really just kind of add to everything that the Sky are already establishing. It's just kind of tough to gauge at the moment who will actually be available for them, given everything that we've spoken to in terms of waiting to see what happens with the Dallas pick, waiting for the lottery to roll out, and all of that fun stuff that comes with that in terms of the draft. But I do think that this team would greatly benefit from shooting in general. Where that shooting comes from at this point does not even matter. They need shooting. They need players that can space the court. And it's not that they lack spacing. It's that they lack getting a sense of urgency in terms of defenders going from collapsing on the paint to taking those steps toward the perimeter. That's what they need. They need somebody that's going to force defenders to get out of the defensive shell, take 2 steps or 3 steps closer to or past the 3-point line. If they can start finding players that can stretch the floor even the slightest bit, their offense is going to see more consistency. You're going to see plenty of more space for Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso to play with on the post. And that's going to allow for the Sky to manipulate the defenses in different ways. And I think that's going to be the determining factor. If they can find those pieces and they can kind of hit home runs on the margins via the draft, like they did in a loud fashion this most recent draft with Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. I got two other things I want to speak to before we close, but pertaining to the draft, that's kind of my mindset. Shooting at all costs. Point guard, shooting guard, small forward, shooting at all costs.
I promise you we will come back to those before we close out. I agree on Olivia Miles. I think Tahina Pow,
Tahina with Durden would do it. Yes.
I mean, she would be good. I wouldn't want to pick her too high, I think is my only concern. And that's kind of picking, that's kind of nitpicking. But Tahina Pow, especially if she has an even better season shooting from the outside this year, with Camila Cardoso gone at South Carolina, then she's somebody who would be high on my radar. But Olivia Miles, first and foremost, she's a solid passer. She's a very willing defender. And I believe if I saw right, she checks in at 5'10", which would give you some height in the backcourt. So I think you can't go wrong with Olivia Miles. She's been around where the Sky would pick in pretty much every mock draft I've seen. I want to push back on Aneesa Morrow just because I feel like that would give a log jam in the front court. And I see what you're saying with the shooting. She barely lost a step transferring from the Big East in DePaul, where she was like the big fish in the small pond, to the SEC, which is markedly better competition. Her numbers dipped a bit, which you would expect, but she was still all Big East. She was still all SEC when she had been all Big East before with DePaul. And the only thing I didn't see was that she somehow didn't make the All-American list at 16 and 10 on the floor. And bringing Aneesa back home would be great. But you already have Angel and Camila, and so then it would be a question of how do you use this? How do you share the ball well? It would fit with Teresa Weatherspoon's identity, because then that would give you 3 scorers in the front court. But I think you can do well with 2 and then spreading shooters around them. And Aneesa's 3-point numbers have never gotten to the point where it would be you could move her from 3 at that 3-4 wing position and have her be a floor spacer from the outside. That's the only thing that I don't like. Everything else I would like. It would be another big signing on draft day if you did get her. I worry how it would fit tactically.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the need for skill development with Aneesa. She does everything that the Sky needs from that wing position. It's the 3-point shooting piece, which I continue to harken on, because that's just such a determining factor for this team's ceiling and them taking next steps in their team growth, but also the growth of Camila and Angel. They need the right pieces around them that will kind of work in tandem with and really kind of uplift them and give them more space and breathing room to operate in. So I really do like Aneesa, and the Sky might be in a position to where they just have to take the best player available when they are able to pick. So at that point, you just work with what you get, what falls into your lap in a sense. But I think that if they can kind of address it that way and add shooting, that would just really change. That would start to change the trajectory. Also give you a player that's under your control roster-wise for multiple seasons too, while you're getting towards obviously Angel and Camila potentially being offered their rookie deals in 4 years or so. Having another player under your full team control would be very beneficial to the books for a Sky team that has a lot of cap space at this moment in time. Some of that will certainly be used this summer, whether they're able to hit the in terms of bringing back Kennedy Carter, whether they're able to make that happen or not remains to be seen. But Kennedy is going to be more than deserving of a bag this summer. And at this moment in time, I do feel like the Chicago Sky will be the team that's able to retain her.
Now, Stephen, I want to get you to your couple points before there's one thing I've been thinking about the last couple weeks that I want to say right at the close, but please go ahead, because I want to hear, if y'all do not already follow Stephen Garner, we say it every single week. Check the man out on Twitter. You see it right there on the screen. Check the man out on YouTube. You're going to see that on the screen in a second. He has a film session on Camila Cardoso's passing that I hope I didn't already skip over what you wanted to say in the first place. But that's really good. We've seen it over the past couple of weeks. So as her shooting and scoring touch develops, her passing has developed. And as always, you can see the man's writings on allchgo.com. So follow Stephen Garner for everything that he has got to say, because I guarantee you will not be disappointed if you are a fan of this thing we call hoops. Stephen, what you got for us, man?
Yeah, I guess we can kind of just transition to that one. Lauren says you already got it up on the screen for us. That Camila is a much better passer than you more than likely think or thought that she is. And it's not always just the passes that she makes, it's the things that she sees on the floor before they happen sometimes in an anticipatory fashion. And her ability to not just see those things, because a lot of players see things on the basketball court, especially from the front court. Not that many players can deliver on the type of things that they're seeing when they have the ball in their hands. And Camila has been scoring to the point to where teams are starting to commit extra bodies to her to collapse the floor, whether they're sending a full-out double team at her from different angles, whether that be one pass away, the opposite 45, or the low defender from the backside. She's starting to catch those passes on the block, anticipate where the help is coming from, getting in the turn and face to see where the help might be coming from, taking one dribble or maybe sometimes 2 or 3 dribbles to let the dust settle on whatever rotation is to come, and then making a proper pass with accuracy and pace on it to where either the direct recipient can get up a catch and shoot or play off of a closing defender, or can make an extra pass and make the defense rotate that much more and allow for the Sky to play advantage basketball. That's not something the Sky have had on consistency at all this season. They don't have anybody within their offense that's been garnering two to the ball on any sort of consistency since Marina Mabry left the team. And that's a context shift for them. That's something that they had to figure out, because if you're not getting the defense to commit to any particular player when they have the ball in their hands, past that original defender that's there, you're just really going up against kind of a brick wall in a sense. So the fact that Camila is establishing herself as a scorer the way that she has post break, and now she's also being able to, by way of that, showcase her playmaking ability and processing and passing ability, it's hitting different for this team. And I think there's a whole lot more they can get into with Camila being featured in these ways that we've seen very briefly post-Olympic break. She can not just pass from the post, she can pass off of the short roll and pick and roll, which is something that we saw her do at South Carolina with Raven Johnson and company a handful of times in the Elite Eight in the Final Four and even the national championship game against Iowa. And she can also execute dribble handoffs. She has a handle. She's not going to go out and cross people over like Kennedy Carter is, but Camila's handle is very functional. She can flow into dribble handoffs. She can make passes off of the live dribble. And I talked about a whole lot of those things that I'm speaking to in that film session that came out prior to Friday's game against the Indiana Fever. So you can check that out on my YouTube page. And Chris, if you had anything you wanted to speak to even more so on Camila, let's chop it up. Otherwise, I do have one other thing to speak to.
No, go for it.
The last thing, it's not been the prettiest of games, collectively or individually, for players on the Chicago Sky, but we cannot go an entire episode without noting the efforts from Lindsey Allen and Michaela Onyenwere since they become starters, but generally speaking, post-Olympic break. Michaela Onyenwere is doing everything that this team needs from anybody that's going to be playing the wing position for this team that's not a superstar player for the entire era that is going to be Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso as the franchise pieces. She's doing everything that you're going to need from the wing position, from defending guards, defending forwards, being able to switch, early communication on defense, deflection, steals, block shots. She's doing everything. She's also an exceptional teammate with everything that she does. How many times have you seen Angel miss a layup, eventually get fouled, and one of the first people, especially if she's on the floor, that's kind of embracing her and letting her know to stay focused, you got the next one, is Michaela Onyenwere. I'm thinking of an example of this was Diamond DeShields in the fourth quarter of the game against the Minnesota Lynx from Sunday. She got a pick six, a steal, and she ended up scoring on a layup. And this is a game where the Sky were trying to fight an uphill battle to get back in the game early in the fourth quarter. Who's the first player jumping up and down off the bench, waving her towel over her head like a rallying cry, trying to get some energy for her team? Michaela Onyenwere. And then if we look at Michaela on the offensive side of things, she's got 4 games post-Olympic break where she scored double digits. In the last 4 games, she's done just that. 15 against Minnesota, 20 against the Indiana Fever, a season high. 15 against the Washington Mystics, 15 against the Las Vegas Aces. Those are, excluding 2 other games this season, the only games where she scored double digits. She's gotten really comfortable with this team. She's scoring in multiple ways, and I think that they're starting to get more functionality in terms of the usage of her in their offense too. She's doing a lot more screening, and because of who's typically guarding her when she's on the floor offensively, her being able to screen is kind of having a different type of impact for them, especially when she's screening for the guards, whether that be Kennedy, whether that be Dana, whether that be Lindsay. And then the last bit, and I think it's a perfect transition, speaking to Lindsay Allen, another player that's gotten very comfortable in the starting lineup post All-Star break. She's also got 4 games where she scored north of double figures in terms of getting 10-plus points in a game. And she's doing so on solid efficiency, but we're also seeing her usage kind of evolve as well. With unfortunately not having Kennedy Carter in the starting lineup for a handful of games, the Sky have been kind of searching for how to get some of the things that Kennedy brought to the starting unit from different players. And the biggest piece that I've seen in that is Lindsay Allen stepping up in her mindset in terms of how she's going about approaching the game. Look at the first play in the second half of the Minnesota Lynx game as a direct example. It's also the same play that they went to start the game against the Indiana Fever, where Kennedy would usually go off of 2 screens from the elbows from one sideline to the other, and that just gets her in movement to then either go into isolation or pick and roll and get into a bunch of other things. Lindsay's now going into that role where they're starting to put her in some of the same situations that Kennedy's in, and because of her dynamic as a player being elite as a passer, she's able to then bring Angel Reese or Camila Cardoso in empty corner pick and roll scenarios, and then they're able to play in 2-player actions from there. And they're being extremely efficient in doing so. Lindsay's getting below the free throw line and scoring on efficiency from there. And she's also continuing to play make, which is what she was brought to the starting lineup to do. So I want to make sure that those 2 players get their flowers because they're beyond deserving and they're both playing extremely well. And if Kennedy can come back and be herself and be healthy, which we hope to see in the coming days, if not potentially today against the Aces, that's going to be something that's really going to determine whether the Sky can finish with that 8th and final playoff spot, or if they kind of revert back and end up missing the playoffs this season.
It's almost anybody's guess at this point. And we talked about whether, your thoughts, you already shared your thoughts on if the Sky will make the playoffs. I'm not as sure just because of the stretch that they've been on, and they've had so many different kinds of games that they've ended up losing. And that's what's going to be tough. You've got to win games. You absolutely have to win games. There's nothing else that you can say. And to win these games, you've got to make those moments count when you have the lead, when you forge a tie. You've got to be able to score in the clutch. You've got to be able to get stops when you need it. Got to keep teams off the foul line. And that's difficult to address all of those issues with 10 games to go in the season. So that's why I'm not as sure. I'm not as sure if the Sky will make the playoffs. But tonight against Las Vegas, not an easy task. This is the most beatable we've seen the Aces in 3 seasons. But the Sky have to win. They have to win games, and it starts tonight against Las Vegas in Las Vegas. Thank you for bringing that up. Tune into the game tonight, of course. The last thing I want to say before we close the show out, stop treating these players like they're your favorite toy. I saw Angel Reese had to block some people on Twitter. I think she's been doing it all season anyway. But there's a lot of Stan accounts that pop up. I saw Breezy Turner talk about this. Blocking and muting Stan accounts really helped her mental health and state of being. Y'all got to stop treating these players like they're your favorite toy, that they, you bring them out of the box, you do with them what you want. You like, they're not Woody, they're not Buzz, they're not Lil Bo Peep. And that goes for Caitlin Clark too. That goes for Cameron Brink. That goes for Diamond Miller. That goes for all of these rookies and these players that as the league is blown up this season and more eyes come in, people are saying and doing wild stuff. So I know it's not really anybody in our chat, save from a couple of the cranks that we have. And appreciate y'all for tuning into the show. But stop treating these players like they are yours and yours alone. They are working professionals. We are an audience that is meant to, critique at times, enjoy at times, but respect at all times. So please stop treating these players and personnel like they are just yours to manipulate, like a Stretch Armstrong from back in the 80s. I hope that everybody got that reference. I know it's a little bit dated at this point in time. Thanks to everybody. Lawrence, I know you got it. Lawrence got it. Lawrence has a Rock'em Sock'em Robots ring right now in the office. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. Our man Eric Nemchok was the screen name that I didn't know where it came from. Eric, get yourself a new screen name. You're famous, baby. You gotta use that fame the way that it should be used, especially as long as you still got that courtside seat, because we all know what's going down next year. But thank you to everybody that tuned in. David Bresson, Zach Noth, Region Rev, DJ Mr. Raj, appreciate the comments today. Brooklyn, a Des Baby, with a lot of salient points in there as well. And everybody who came in with us. For the man with the 2 guns in the holster, Lawrence Benedetto on the quick draw. And for Stephen Pridgeon Garner, once again, follow him at StateUS.3 and Stephen Pridgeon Garner 3 on YouTube. I'm Chris Pennant at Quandary Kitten. This is the CHGO Sky Podcast at CHGO_Sky, a part of the CHGO Sports and All-City Sports Network. Whether you're in Chicago, Phoenix, Dallas, or Philadelphia, or Denver, you can always be part of the All-City Sports Network. Until next time, folks, be good, do great things, and keep your head above the clouds.
We all silly like the mayor.